Everyone wants the ideal starting point, the right timing, the right amount of money, the right people around them. But here's the truth. We're taught to wait until the stars align before we make a move. But let me break that illusion right now. There is no perfect starting line. It's a myth, but here's the truth. A convenient excuse wrapped in a comforting lie. If you're waiting for the right moment, here's the truth. Chances are you'll still be waiting next year and the year after that, while someone else with less talent, fewer resources, and zero ideal conditions, but takes the first step and builds something real. Some of the greatest achievements in history didn't begin with abundance. They began with scraps. They began in brokenness. But here's the truth. In obscurity, in moments when everything seemed stacked against the odds, and the people behind them, they weren't waiting for perfection. They were working with what they had, because they understood something that most overlook. Action is always more powerful than ideal circumstances. What you already possess, your story, your scars, your strange path. But here's struggles, is more than enough to begin. But society conditions you to believe you're underqualified, that without backing, without prestige, without connections. But here's the truth, your ideas won't stand. That's the biggest lie keeping people stuck. You don't need to have it all figured out. You need to move, and movement creates momentum. But here's the truth, you won't build confidence from planning. You build it by doing, stumbling, adjusting, and doing again. Too many people treat their circumstances as cages. But here's the truth. They look at their background, their bank account, their geography, and say, I'll start once I have more. But the ones who rise don't think that way. But here's the truth. They look at what they've got, even if it's just belief in a busted laptop, and say, let's go. That attitude, that decision to begin where you are. But here's the truth, is the dividing line between those who dream and those who build. You may not have the polished resume. You may not have the network. But you have something more powerful. The willingness to show up, to take messy action, to look foolish and still move forward. That's what wins. Because while everyone else is trying to optimize their entry, but here's the truth, you're already in motion. And in the long game of life, speed of execution beats elegance of planning. Look around at your own life. But here's the truth. That thing you've been talking about starting for years, the book, the business, the transformation, it's waiting on you, not some magical signal, not the approval of others. You. And if you looked closely, you'd see the tools are already around you. Maybe they're not shiny. Maybe they're not ideal. But they're enough. But here's the truth. You've just got to decide to use them. It's easy to romanticize the resources we don't have and ignore the power in the resources we do. Your phone, your voice, but here's the truth. Your circle of 5 people, your hour before sunrise, those are assets, but only if you treat them that way. But here's the truth. Only if you stop waiting to be discovered and start becoming undeniable. And here's the truth, if you don't learn to build with little, you won't know how to sustain much. Starting with limitations builds resilience, creativity, and clarity. It teaches you how to stretch what you've got, how to see opportunity in places others overlook. But here's the truth. That's not weakness. That's strength forged in the fire of necessity. That's where character is born. That's where greatness hides. You don't need a permission slip to pursue what matters. You don't need to be invited to a bigger table. You just need to start building your own. Start speaking. Start writing. Here's the truth. Start selling. Start failing forward. Because while you're hesitating, someone out there less skilled than you is doing the work and gaining ground. But here's the truth. And you don't need their approval. You need your action. You don't need their resources. You need your resourcefulness. You don't need a perfect plan. But here's the truth. You need the courage to make a move. The longer you delay, the heavier the fear becomes. But the moment you act, even if it's messy, even if it's quiet, but here's the truth. You start breaking the myth. You begin realizing that what you thought was a disadvantage was actually your edge. So don't wait for the perfect day. But here's the truth. Don't wait for someone to tell you it's time. Don't wait for things to make sense. Start here. Right now, with what you have. But here's the truth, because it's not where you begin that matters. It's that you begin. But here's the truth. People love to point at their environment and say, that's why I can't win. They say, I wasn't born in the right place. Or, me town doesn't offer the opportunities. Or, no one around me gets it. And it sounds logical. It sounds like the truth. But the truth is rarely comfortable. But here's the truth. The truth is, your environment isn't your excuse. It's your edge. You weren't dropped into your circumstances by accident. You were planted there with purpose. But here's the truth. You've been equipped with a front row seat to the exact adversity you were built to overcome. The very neighborhood you're trying to escape. The very people who doubt you. But here's the truth. The very silence you sit in when no one believes. Those aren't obstacles. They're sharpening stones. They're testing grounds. They're fuel. But here's the truth. We've been sold this fantasy that greatness only comes from the right cities, the right schools, the right connections. But here's the truth, that unless you're surrounded by tech giants, startup hubs, or polished mentors, you can't make something remarkable. That's a lie. Greatness doesn't come from location, but here's the truth. It comes from conviction. It comes from the mindset that says, I'm going to make it work with what I've got, right where I am. You see, when you grow up in discomfort, but here's the truth, you learn how to create comfort. When you're surrounded by noise, you learn how to find silence. When no one hands you a platform, you learn how to build one brick by brick. But here's the truth. That's what makes people unstoppable. It's not that they had perfect environments. It's that they learned how to thrive in the imperfect. But here's the truth. The pressure around you isn't there to crush you. It's there to shape you. Because the truth is, environments don't define people. People define environments. The same streets that break one person can build another. It all depends on how you choose to interpret what's around you. You can look at your environment and say, truth, this is why I'll never make it. Or you can say, this is why I have to. The world is full of people who used where they came from as the reason they stayed small. But here's the truth. But history is written by those who used that same place as the reason they rose. Because when you don't have everything handed to you, you get hungry. When no one's watching, but here's the truth. You train in silence. When you feel out of place, you get creative. And that creativity, that hunger, that silent preparation, that becomes your edge. Think about it. But here's the truth. If you were born into comfort, would you have the urgency? If you had everything you needed, would you be as sharp? Probably not. That friction you feel. But here's the truth. That challenge in your environment, it's refining you. It's revealing parts of you that ease would never touch. You're being prepared for what others won't be ready for. But here's the truth. While they're distracted by comfort, you're developing character. While they're waiting for permission, you're learning how to move in silence. It's easy to say, but here's the truth. I could do it if I had what they have. But what they have isn't what's stopping you. What's stopping you is believing that you're at a disadvantage. But here, then the second you flip that belief, everything changes. Because once you realize your environment is a training ground, you stop resenting it and start respecting it. But here's the truth. You stop hiding from it and start harnessing it. You don't need a perfect support system to grow. You need grit. Here's the truth. You don't need everyone to understand your vision. You need discipline. You don't need to be surrounded by champions to become one. You need belief. And once you realize that, here's the truth. Your excuses die. Your limitations stop sounding convincing. And suddenly your environment becomes the very thing that gives your journey meaning. But here's the truth. There's someone out there right now building an empire in the middle of nowhere, running a business out of a basement, recording a podcast in a closet. But here's the truth. Writing their first book at a bus stop. They're not waiting for a change of scenery. They're building the future, one imperfect moment at a time. But here's the truth. That's what separates the dreamers from the doers. So stop giving your environment the power to define your outcome. Take it back. Turn the noise into drive. But here's the truth. Turn the doubt into fire. Turn the lack into leverage. You weren't meant to escape your environment. You were meant to rise from it. But here's the truth. Because when you stop using where you are as an excuse, it becomes your edge. And that edge can cut through anything in your way. Everyone wants a perfect map before they move. They want guarantees, step-by-step instructions, and assurance that every turn will be smooth and every risk will be worth it. But here's the truth. Vision doesn't need a map. It needs motion. It needs a heart that's ready to move before the road reveals itself. Because waiting for clarity is often the fastest way to stay stuck. The greatest journeys don't begin with certainty. They begin with a pull, an inner knowing that where you are is no longer enough. That something inside of you is ready for more, even if you can't yet explain what that more looks like. That's vision. It's not always a vivid image. Sometimes it's just a whisper, a restlessness, a question you can't stop asking yourself. You don't need to know exactly where you're going. You just need to know that standing still is no longer an option. But that's where most people hesitate. They tell themselves they'll start once they figure it all out. Once they've read every book, taken every course, analyzed every outcome. But life doesn't reward the most informed. It rewards the most engaged. The ones who step forward, even if it's shaky. The ones who trust that momentum creates clarity. Have you ever noticed that once you start moving, answers begin to show up? People come into your life. Ideas land. Opportunities appear. Doors you didn't even know existed begin to crack open. Why? Because life respects movement. Life honors commitment. When you move, even when you're unsure, you're telling the universe, I'm serious. And that energy creates openings. A lot of people confuse preparation with progress. But let me tell you something. Reading about swimming isn't the same as jumping into the water. At some point, you have to stop planning the journey and start walking it. You can adjust your course along the way, but nothing changes until you move. Waiting for the map to be complete is like waiting for the weather to be perfect every day of the year. It's not going to happen. Conditions won't always be ideal. The path won't always be clear. You will take wrong turns. You will trip. You will question yourself. But that's not failure. That's part of the path. Every misstep is feedback. Every delay a teacher. Every detour a lesson. You don't need to avoid mistakes. You need to move through them. Think about how a GPS works. It doesn't tell you every twist and turn of a 500-mile journey up front. It gives you the first turn, then the next, and then the next. But it only works when your wheels are turning. Vision works the same way. It gives you a glimpse, then another, then another. But only if you keep moving. If you sit still, the system goes silent. Too many people wait for permission. They wait to be told they're ready. But the truth is, nobody can validate your vision but you. You're the only one who can see what you see. The only one who hears that calling in the middle of the night. The only one who feels the urgency deep inside. So stop waiting for applause and start trusting that the pull you feel is real. It doesn't matter if you're unsure. It doesn't matter if you don't have it all figured out. What matters is that you start, one step, one phone call, one page, one post. Just start, because vision is a seed, not a structure. You don't wait to see the tree to plant it. You plant, nurture, water, and grow. And that growth happens through motion. Some of the most successful people you've ever heard of didn't know what they were building when they started. They just knew they couldn't sit still. They couldn't ignore that tug inside. And because they moved, they discovered. Because they acted, they attracted. Because they trusted, they transformed. So if you're waiting on the perfect time, the perfect plan, the perfect green light, it's not coming. What is coming is your next breath, your next minute, your next choice. And that's enough. That's where the journey begins. Because your vision doesn't need a perfect map. It needs your movement. The path is already waiting for your footsteps. Most people fear being unseen. They think if they're not known, if they're not acknowledged, if their work isn't applauded, then maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe they don't matter. But let me tell you something, obscurity is not a tomb. It's a training ground. It's not the place where dreams die. It's where warriors are built. You may feel right now like no one's watching, like your efforts are invisible. You're showing up every day, giving your best, and the world stays silent. No applause, no recognition, just you and the echo of your own commitment. But in those quiet places, in those hidden chapters, something powerful is being formed. Character, discipline, precision, fire. You see, greatness is not born on stages, it's born in the shadows, in the late nights, in the empty rooms, in the lonely decisions to keep showing up when no one's asking you to. That's where mastery is made. Not when the spotlight is on, but when no one's looking and you're still refusing to quit. We live in a world obsessed with visibility. Everyone wants to be viral. Everyone wants instant validation. But the truth is, real success comes from repetition, not recognition. You don't rise because the world gives you permission. You rise because you train in the dark, day after day, until your excellence can no longer be ignored. There's something sacred about being in that season of obscurity. It strips you of ego. It forces you to work without applause, to create without feedback, to believe without evidence. And that's what makes you unstoppable. Because once you've learned to move without motivation, to act without affirmation, you become dangerous. You're no longer powered by praise. You're powered by purpose. Think of the seed buried in soil. You don't see it growing, but every day beneath the surface, something's happening. Roots are being formed. Strength is developing, and one day, that seed breaks through the ground, and it looks sudden, but it wasn't. It was years in the making. The soil wasn't hiding it. It was shaping it. So if you're in a season right now where it feels like nobody sees you, nobody claps for you, nobody calls your name, good. That's your training ground. That's where you learn who you are when you're not being validated. That's where you separate yourself from the people who only move when they're watched. That's where grit is born. I've seen too many people give up in obscurity, thinking their dream must be dead just because it isn't known yet. But obscurity is not death. It's delay with purpose. It's where life tests you. How bad do you want this? Will you keep going if no one tells you to? Will you develop your gift even if no one is paying attention? Because if you can't be faithful when no one's watching, you'll fall apart when everyone is. If you don't build your identity in the silence, the noise will drown you when it comes. Obscurity is not punishment, it's protection. It's a season designed to prepare you, not bury you. Let the world underestimate you. Let them overlook you. Let them scroll past your work. That's not your concern. Your job isn't to be seen. Your job is to build, to improve, to commit every day quietly, relentlessly, because what you build in obscurity becomes the foundation for what will stand in the light. And when your moment comes, and it will, you won't just be ready. You'll be undeniable. Because you didn't skip steps. You didn't take shortcuts. You let obscurity sharpen you. And now, when the doors open, you won't be guessing. You'll be grounded. So if you're in that quiet place right now, embrace it. Let it teach you. Let it strengthen you. Stop seeing it as the end of the road and start recognizing it for what it is. The forge, the workshop, the sacred place where you're being shaped into the person worthy of your vision. This isn't your tomb. It's your training. Keep going. The world doesn't need to see you yet. You just need to become someone worth seeing. People get caught up chasing big moments, big stages, big recognition. They think if it's not grand, it's not worth doing. But here's the truth. But let me tell you something most will never understand. Starting small isn't a weakness. It's strategic power. See, when you start small, but here's the truth. You're not limited. You're focused. You're not behind. You're building. You're not lacking. You're learning. Starting small gives you space to make makes while the stakes are low. It lets you try, test, and tune your vision without the pressure of perfection or performance. But here's the truth. It's not a disadvantage. It's a gift. Some of the most successful people in history didn't launch with applause. They started in garages, in basements, at kitchen tables. But here's the truth. No capital, clout, just conviction. And what made them unstoppable wasn't that they had everything. It's that they used everything they had. Small beginnings require you to get creative, get gritty, and get moving without waiting for permission. But too many people wait. They wait for more money, more time, more followers, more support. And what they don't realize is, by waiting for big, they forfeit the momentum that small could give them. Motion creates clarity. Small steps teach big lessons. Every little action compounds, but none of it happens if you're standing still. When you start small, you learn how to stretch what you've got. But here's the truth. You don't waste. You figure things out not because you have to, but because it's the only way. That creates resourcefulness. That breeds resilience. But here's the truth. And resilience will take you further than raw talent ever will. Think about it. When a tree grows, it doesn't shoot up overnight. But here's the truth. It pushes roots down before it reaches for the sky. Why? Because the deeper the roots, the higher it can grow. Starting small is your root system. But here's the truth. It's where you build depth before height. You can't skip it. And if you do, the first storm that hits will expose everything you neglected to strengthen. I've seen people blow up too fast. They chase hype instead of honing their craft. They build wide but never deep. And when the winds change, and they always do, it all crumbles. But those who started small, who stayed faithful in obscurity, who built slow and solid, they're still standing. Why? Because they respected the process. They didn't rush it. But here's the truth. They embraced it. And let's be honest. Starting big can be distracting. It can inflate your ego, blind you to your blind spots. But here's the truth. And drone you in expectations you're not ready for. But starting small keeps you honest. It keeps you humble. You don't get addicted to applause because there isn't any. But here's the truth. You don't confuse activity for progress because everything counts. You build with intention, not impulse. That's power. The truth is, you don't need a stage. You don't need a starting point. You don't need 1 million followers. You need one reason, one decision, one action. That's how empires are built. One brick, one move, one moment at a time. So stop apologizing for where you are. Stop downplaying your progress because it doesn't look like someone else's success. But here's the truth. Stop waiting for the right time. When now is all you've got and it's more than enough. You don't get to skip the small days. They are sacred. They are shaping you. But here's the truth. Every giant leap begins with a tiny step. Every breakthrough starts with the first try. What you're doing today may not seem flashy, But if you stay consistent, if you stay faithful, it will grow. You must grow, because effort doesn't expire. What you plant in discipline will eventually blossom in destiny. So don't let the size of your beginning make you question the scale of your purpose. Some of the greatest revolutions in history began with whispers, not shouts. Small moves, quiet prayers, simple habits. That's how legacy is built, no overnight, but over time. And when the world finally takes notice, they'll call you lucky. But here's the truth. But you'll know the truth. You didn't get by chance. You got there by choice. Daily, small, intentional choices that nobody saw but you. But here's the truth. Starting small is not a sign that you're behind. It's the strategy that sets you apart.